Welcome to GS podcast number 84. 84. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. I think I got that right. Another fantastic guest, Dave Rubin's returning back to the show, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Before I move on to that, time to pimp out the begging bowl. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/gspellchecker. If you want to make a one-off contribution as well, there's a PayPal option, and you can get that by visiting gspellchecker.com and clicking on support this podcast. Had a great chat with Dave. I think many of you would be familiar with the Rubin Report. Dave was on the show in November, and since then it's just got bigger, more subscribers, controversial guests, big name guests, so we talk a little bit about that as well. We delve into American politics, we delve into the EU referendum, all sorts of things. Donald Trump obviously comes up, and I really enjoyed it. I'm a big fan of what Dave's doing with his time at the moment and what he's focusing his energies on, so he'll let you know all about the big move the Rubin Report's trying to make it in terms of its growth, and it's interesting really because it's one of them things where we love it because it represents our viewpoints, but it can't really go as far as other mainstream media platforms without your support. So I really would consider chipping in if you believe in, obviously help the God the Spell Checker podcast out first, but if you have any free shekels lying around after that, Dave will take them. So to find out more information on that, head over to rubinreport.com, and you can find the show there if you're crazy enough not to have delved in there. Some great guests, a few of them have been on my show as well, some great people who I admire. You can find Dave on Twitter as well, at Rubin Report. Send him some love, send him some follow-up questions. I'm sure he'll be happy to hear from you. You can keep up to date on this very podcast at gspellchecker.com. Enjoy!
There's a word that some folks find real hard to spell. Ain't it horrible for you, except after seeing who cared to go burn in hell? But then along came a man, a spell checker from the God of Creed, and he set out upon a noble quest to help those who don't know what it means. And he said, it goes A-T-H-E-I-S-T, and don't you put that I before that E. A-T-H-E-I-S-T, tell me when those speak to W. And he keeps telling them things you gotta say. Reason shoppers at night will make them run away, but if they start that fight, well, they can go all day. Spell checker, he's a god of spell checker. Now you know how it goes, so sing along with me. A-T-H-E-I-S-T, 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 A-T-H-E-I-S-T.
It's a great pleasure to welcome Sir David Rubin back to the GS podcast. Hello.
It's good to be back, sir. That's very nice. Does that mean that I have been knighted already? Can you be a sir? I guess that's just in theory until I'm officially knighted, right?
I'll put a word in with the Queen for you, and we'll see what we can do.
She hasn't been calling me back. I got to look into that.
She's a busy woman.
Yeah.
So how's things? How are you?
Things are great, man. Let's see. I was trying to think right before you called. When did we do this last time? Was it last summer? Well, I'm thinking it was maybe around July or so of 2015.
That sounds about right. Too long ago, Dave. Too long ago.
Absolutely. So it was I think it was around July of 2015. I hadn't even started my show on Aura yet, and obviously a lot has happened since then, and this whole political awakening that's going on right now has really just morphed and expanded, and it's incredible. And that I'm a little piece of it is just amazing.
Absolutely. So you came out of the gate strong anyway with the Rubin Report. Was Sam Harris your first guest?
Sam was the first one. That if you're going to start a show and you're going to be in this space, I think I nailed that one.
Just checked. It was November. It's November when we spoke. It just feels like it was that long ago.
Wow. So it was a little bit after we started. Okay. All right, good to know. Yeah.
Okay, so Sam, big strong guest, and I really enjoyed what you tried to do with that episode, to kind of clear the air, address some of the misconceptions about Sam's views. I say misconceptions, outright distortions.
Yeah, outright distortions is much better than misconceptions.
And it was a really great idea, great format. You have this persona where you're not a kind of raging political pundit, where you just want to be heard rather than have a conversation. And the show's really took off. From the subscribers are through the roof. It's been really successful. I know most of my followers are into it, and now you've got even bigger plans. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. Well, first off, I should say that I think like you, it's not a persona. I mean, the person that I am when I'm on camera and the way I behave on camera really is who I am. Now, of course, when there's a camera on you or a mic in front of you, you may speak a slightly differently or, use slightly different words or try to communicate slightly differently. But all of what I do up there is me. There really is no character there. And I don't think too much before I start. Like with this, we just started. We spoke for literally 20 seconds beforehand, just saying hi. And then here we go. And that's how I try to approach life. And it's how I try to approach the show. But for the move since then, basically I was with Aura since September, and a couple weeks ago, a few things happened that it made me think that I really should control and own and fully distribute and all of this stuff on my own. One thing that happened was Aura was going through some changes, and they wanted everything off YouTube. They just didn't want to be part of the YouTube game, which is totally fine. That's their prerogative. They're a business, and they're welcome to make whatever decisions they want to on there. For me, though, we've built something so cool here, and it's growing so rapidly. As you alluded to, it took us about 2 years to get the first 100,000 subscribers. And in about 6 months since then, we've gotten another 130,000. So not only the numbers, but the type of community we've built on there, I'm incredibly proud. Probably the one thing that I might be most proud of is that if you look at our YouTube videos, the comment section, which is normally just, crazy, psychotic,
Yes.
True racist trolling and fighting, our comment section is actually pretty on point.
That is remarkable.
Even if they're disagreeing, it's pretty much on the issues, and that I'm so proud of that. So anyway, I just decided, look, this was my chance. Sometimes, you get an opportunity that you think of immediately, and sometimes it gets thrown upon you. And in this case, it was like, I've got a moment here where what we're talking about is relevant. I feel like, in some ways that I've been a little ahead of the curve on some of this stuff as far as mainstream, especially, as have you. And I felt like it's finally catching up. My audience is there. And let's try this. Let's try to go fan funded. And we launched it 8 days ago on Patreon, 8 or 9 days ago. And we immediately hit our 20K goal. And David, my executive producer, and Amira, my associate producer, they resigned as well. And we started a production company. We're building out the studio right now, and it's very cool. And the fans showed up. I said, show me the money, guys. You believe in these ideas? Let's build this thing together. And people were more than happy to. So I'm feeling very good right now.
That's excellent. Congratulations, man. I mean,
Thanks.
Patreon in general and crowdsourcing content is just revolutionised the way people release things now. I mean, everyone's a producer now. Everyone's a host. Everyone's this and that. And if it has any worth, someone will... I mean, I'm always amazed that people will pay for content that they get for free if they find some value in it. There's some amazingly wonderful, kind, generous, active people out there. And I think that's reflected by that response you've had on Patreon.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, if you think about it, people have been so dumbed down by media, right? Yeah. The mainstream media, especially if you're talking about in the news space, has been so dumbed down, and it's barely even news. And then the online media, which was good for a while. I think when YouTube first started, there was this need for alternate voices, and I think it really helped grow a movement. But it's pretty bad too in a lot of respects. There's nobody gatekeeping. There's nobody double checking. Now actually we have YouTubers that are safeguarding the truth online while fighting other YouTubers, which is all cool. That's sort of the democratization of all this stuff. But there was a need for this, and people that's the thing. If I've learned anything in the last little while, is that people don't mind paying for something if they believe it's good, if they believe it's important. And, as I laid out in the video that I said when we did this, look, we have, 200,000 subscribers. And if half of you guys don't have a dime, and another half of you don't even really like me, now we're at 50 grand. And if half of you guys just don't even think it's worth it, now we're at 25. And at 25,000, if you all gave $1, now we're at 25 grand a month. I can build something great. Now, and we're basically we're somewhere really close to that right now. We're going to do one more little push this week, and then it'll build organically. But the point is, people, especially in this space where people have been so stifled and feel like they're tired of being called racists and bigots and homophobes and sexists, and they're tired of our debate that's gotten so dumb. they're okay with putting their money where their mouth is, and it's very cool.
Excellent. I mean, I think there's something to be said for the voluntary nature of it as well, isn't there? I mean, I think we kind of, our attitudes have changed since the internet about paying for things. I think we expect everything for free. I don't think we kind of appreciate that it is somebody's, all their free time essentially, in passion, blood, sweat and tears goes into a lot of this content that we just, take for nothing.
Yeah, look, this is my life. This is it. You know what I mean? I wake up at 7 a.m. and, I start, and then when I finish it at midnight, I stop. And, there are some breaks in there for happy hour occasionally, and I eat pretty well. But, this is my life. So this was it, either the fans were going to go, you know what? We kind of like this thing, but we don't want to help. And then I don't know what I would have done, but it's worked, and we have huge plans for expansion. There's all kinds of things we can do now because we have the money now and the studio where we can build out a lot more. We can do more shows, and as you know, you do more shows. Well, then you can monetize more, and then you have more money, and then I want to hire some new people. There's so much more we can do now, and it was just by taking a risk, and that's, I think, what life is all about.
Fantastic. So is this transition going to be seamless? Are you going to carry on for a while, or is there going to be a break and a big launch date? How are you going to work it?
So there's a little break right now. So basically we announced this last Monday, and then last week I did, just the full on push all week, and I've been Skyping one-on-one with people to thank them, and we have all kinds, Patreon's very cool because look, if you have $1 and you want to give $1 a month, that's great. If you have a couple bucks, you get the newsletter. If you have a couple more bucks, you get some exclusive videos. We're doing group hangouts for some more. There's t-shirts, there's mugs. I mean, basically everyone that creates on Patreon decides, well, what is this worth? And then it's up to your audience to say, okay, I got a couple bucks. Or look, I've had a couple people that gave us, we did one-time donations on PayPal. We've had a couple people give us $1,000 that don't even want anything in return. They just like the idea. They just want to show support. So there's a lot of cool ways to crowdfund now. And what's really nice is at this point, between Patreon and the YouTube Rev, and I'm working on a couple other deals, I'll never be in a position, as far as I can see, where I would have to sell out in any way. My fans are now giving me the base to move forward and go, keep pushing this message, keep going forward, having these conversations, pushing the ideas of free thought and free speech. And I won't have to worry, well, oh shit, I need this deal tomorrow, or we're screwed, because now it's not the case, because the core group said, we're here for you. And that's pretty cool.
That's excellent, isn't it? Because I think you can be compromised a little bit when you're relying on the clicks for payment. It kind of informs the kind of things you go after. It's about attracting attention rather than having the conversation.
You're 100% right. And one of the things when I launched this show back in September, the first video that I did was the Rubin Report rules, and I laid out 10 rules basically that were the guiding principles for the show pretty much. And, one of them was, I'm not going to do clickbait, because I'm well versed. I've been on YouTube for a long time, and I know how a lot of these channels work, and I know how the algorithms work and all that stuff. And yeah, you can clickbait the hell out of it. But what you ultimately get, you'll inflate your numbers and you might make a little more money, but you get views that are useless, that don't help anything. You're tricking people into watching things. And even now, when we have guests on, sometimes a guest will say something, and, my guys will have a little internal discussion. We could title it this way or that way. And we know that it could literally double, triple, or more the views. And I always say, you know what? Let's put it out there. Our audience is there. And if the other people are going to find it, they're going to find it. And it makes me feel like I'm doing something good. And I just don't want to be in that game. I just don't. I've been in it at some level a long time ago, and it's not something I'm interested in anymore.
Yeah, integrity is worth a lot, isn't it?
I mean, that's all you got, right?
Yeah.
Like, that really is all you got. And, I say that, look, all the time. I'm not a perfect person by any stretch. This process actually has made me better. I feel so beholden to my audience now. I feel these people have really stepped up for me, and it's important that I continue stepping up for them. So I'm honored by that. But I'm not perfect in any way. And I'll keep doing the best job that I can. And you know what? When the day comes where I really drop the ball on some interview or I screw up something, they'll call me out on it, and then we'll talk about that. That's what's beautiful about having a weekly show. Let them, if somebody comes in and blatantly lies, and I just miss it or I gloss over it or whatever, well, then call me out. And look, okay, I've had little moments where, people call me out on this or that, and that's great. That's absolutely in the spirit of the way I do the show. Excellent.
Well, in terms of the show, let's talk a little bit about guests. We've had a little bit of crossover ourselves with mutual people who I think we both respect, and I noticed you get a lot of kickback on the internets about your on your guest choices, quote unquote controversial guest. And I was wondering, is there a line for you in the kind of person you'll have on your show? Is there a limit, or will you speak to anyone? Where's the line there, do you think?
Well, speak to anyone. Look, I would only speak to someone that has some value in saying something. So, sometimes I get fans that email me and say, I got to be heard and, put me on the show and, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, you got to do some work, get known somehow, do something valuable, and then maybe we can talk. So it's not just about anyone. Look, as far as some of the more controversial people, so I think Tommy Robinson is probably the best example of this.
Yes.
So, a lot of people. So Tommy had reached out to me, and I thought about it for a while, and I started following him on Twitter, and I saw the types of things that he tweets about. And look, it's within the scope of some of the stuff that I talk about, obviously, because he's talking about Islamism, he's talking about jihad, he's talking about how it's affected his life. Now, look, you can Google him very quickly, and there are things that he has said that I think probably have gone overboard, or he hasn't always made the distinction between the doctrine of Islam and the nominal Muslim person, and all that kind of stuff. And when I was deciding to interview him or not, I had a discussion with Sam about something, with Sam Harris, and it wasn't about Tommy, but he said something to me about how, because he's staked out some of these positions, sometimes that I don't even think are controversial until people manipulate them and then suddenly they sound very controversial. He said that there are probably some people out there that wouldn't want to work with him. Or wouldn't want to interview him. And when Sam said that, look, I've gotten to know him well enough at this point that this is a very decent human being, beyond the politics or all the brouhaha online and all that stuff. He's a really decent, good guy. And the idea that he would be chilled out of certain conversations made me think, you know what, I can't be afraid to interview Tommy then, because let these ideas be heard. And that's, that also goes to a little bit of why I interview the way I do, which is I let people talk. I let their ideas be heard. Now, if somebody blatantly lied, you know what I mean? If somebody said something completely insane, George Washington was the one who assassinated Abraham Lincoln, or, just something that I do as a lie. Of course you call them out on it. But if it's their opinion, then I want that opinion to be heard. For the idea that I would just then immediately jump down their throat is there's plenty of other shows for that. And I push and pull when I think I should, but that doesn't mean I do it right every time, and that's fine too.
Yeah, I mean, there's this idea, isn't there? I mean, you can only really put their views on record for everybody else. I think that's a service in itself, but there's also this idea, you get a lot of pushback from people who weren't there at the time, but will say, well, why didn't you bring him up on this? Everyone's got a million issues with every other guest you have. And do you ever regret not asking certain things? Do you ever take some of these things on board?
Well, one of the times, I had this guy Mike Cernovich on, who's sort of an alt-right online star right now here in the Twitterverse. And after I had him on, a bunch of people started tweeting at me that they hunted down a tweet that he had sent 2 years before where he said something about rape. I don't even remember exactly what it was, but implying that he was pro-rape. Now, I met the guy. I don't think he's pro-rape, and it may have been an oddly worded tweet. I don't even know the context. I'm not even trying to defend him or explain it away in any level. But people were then angry at me. See, Dave Rubin's promoting rape apologists.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's like, guys, he has probably 50,000 tweets, if not more. It happened 2 years ago. I didn't even have the show at the time. And look, I think there's a different expectation. Look, if I was on CNN and I had a staff of 50 people doing research, I suppose it's possible that somebody could have gone through every tweet and we could have got it. But I don't, and I don't even think that's the spirit of what a conversation is supposed to be. But you know what? If there are always going to be people online who are just looking to play gotcha. Oh, you see, there was some idea that I want to get Rubin somehow. How can I get him? How can I get him? He talked to this guy. I don't like this guy. Let me go back in that guy's Twitter and then somehow accuse Rubin of endorsing a tweet that happened 2 years before he even had his freaking show. So, you got to take some of this with a grain of salt because a lot of times people's intentions are good, but you can't get too caught up in it because, well, you have to do what you think is right when you're interviewing someone or doing anything online, and you let the chips fall where they may. Sure, I suppose with Tommy, look, I think he laid out a pretty solid case for the things he's talking about, and he did go out of the way, by the way, to make the distinction between doctrine and people and a few other things. There might have been a way that I could have dug further into his history and found a video where he said this or that directly about Muslims and this. I did the best job I could. That's really how I feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've interviewed Tommy as well, and he's somebody who I'm unsure about on a lot of things, but I think he is fascinating, and I think there's a gulf of difference between the way he was portrayed in the British media and the actual man. I mean, the British media, I think you wouldn't have seen all this at the time, but he was essentially some right-wing, racist, neo-Nazi, hooligan, all the things you could think of, and I bought into that for a long time, and speaking to the man, and that's definitely not the truth. See, just by virtue of me saying that now, I become a de facto Tommy Robinson promoter.
Yeah, and look, you're talking to me, and I'm a rape apologist, so, because somebody tweeted about rape. But that's the point. That's why these conversations need to happen, because think about it. If we, and it's more apropos actually to you because you're in the same country as him, but if you had said, no, here's this guy, this right-wing guy, and the media paints him as this right-wing guy, even though he laid out some cases in my interview with him where he's defended black people from racism, and he went into a meeting, I think it was at one of the original immigration things. He went in with a black friend of his, and they didn't want him in there, and Tommy immediately walked out. So no, people want everything to be black and white. But think about it. If you had not had that conversation with him, then you just let people with bad intentions own the argument. All you did was open up the discussion. And that doesn't mean you endorse everything he says. And it doesn't automatically make you or he a bad person. And this is the part that I think people have to get over. And both sides could do a better job at this, about really being okay with hearing some things that might upset you.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about what you touched on earlier about the way people speak about Sam and the things they say about him. And I've followed his work from as far back as I can remember, so I know what he's about. I know it's not true. But then I'm hearing similar criticisms of other people I'm not familiar with, and there's just no way of entering that abyss of, toxic waste fresh and finding out what they're actually about, because it's already been soiled, and there's certain people that their reputation is just so toxic, I can't even get a handle on it, and it's unfair really, because they may just be as on point and liberal as Sam Harris is.
I think that's such an incredibly valid point and really shouldn't be glossed over. People really need to understand this. That's why I talk so much about these cries of racism and bigotry and sexism and homophobia and all this stuff, because those words, they chill to the point where there might be somebody else that we don't even know about, that you're going to come across one day, and he's going to say some interesting things, but then you're going to see, well, somebody called him a racist, and then it makes you go, I don't know if I want to get involved in that, and even in that conversation. And that's so dangerous, because guess what? Someone could come after you with those same accusations. And now, every now and again, someone will come at me at them, and they almost become laughable. Because, look, if you took if you took the main players on what I would say is our side of this, the more classic liberal side, the more free-thinking side of this argument that's been happening, and you took the main players, and you took Sam, and you took Majid, and you took a guy like Gad Saad, or you took Ayaan. We should talk a little bit of Ayaan, because she's the hero of heroes, I think, and a few other people. But if you took these people, none of them, they'll paint everyone. They're racist neocons. I have never heard of any of them really calling for war or nation building. I don't see any of them trying to put policies in place that are based in racism. They're having difficult conversations. But if your response to a difficult conversation is to call your opponent a bigot, that really shows where your intentions are.
I agree. I mean, Ayaan Hirsi Ali's personal hero of mine. I actually think I'm a massive amount of in love with that woman. I think it's fair to say. But I mean, she stands for. I mean, she's the perfect feminist success story, the story of emancipation, everything about her past and what she's achieved is all wrapped up in this one story, and you'd think she'd be the poster child for all feminist issues, and the way that she's dismissed and betrayed is still a complete mystery to me on so many levels.
But the thing is, it shouldn't be a mystery anymore because these people, their intentions have been revealed. So just real quick, for the people that don't know Ayaan, I mean, she was born in Somalia. She underwent female genital mutilation, which it sounds horrible, but Google it if you don't know what it is. She survives that. Then they were going to arrange a marriage to her with her cousin. She escapes. She eventually ends up, I think she went to Brussels first, if I'm not mistaken, or Belgium, but she ends up in Holland, where she becomes a member of parliament. Her friend, Theo Van Gogh, who was doing a documentary that had partly to do with Islam, is murdered on the street, and they paste a note to his chest saying, Ayaan, we're coming for you next. She's moved to America. She now lives with extraordinary security. When I Skyped with her, we didn't even know what state she was in. They wouldn't even tell us that. So think about that.
Wow.
She fights for the rights of women and minorities, and yet she is fearlessly an outspoken critic of Islam, which has treated her horribly as an African-American woman, and regardless of whether she was African-American, as a woman. And she's hated by the left. She's hated by this regressive ideology because she is not a victim. She has taken, and that's what they want. That's why they love the Oppression Olympics. They need of us all to be easily put into boxes where they can say your victimhood is worse than yours, and yours is worse than yours, and yours is worse than yours, and they never look at the individual. So she says it so well, that the ultimate minority, if you care about minorities, is the individual. So she should literally be the poster child for the entire left. But because of this regressive ideology, which is not progressive, but it's actually backwards because it will judge a person on their color and their ideas and their religion more than their individual thoughts, she's hated by them. And it's just, forget Sam, forget me, forget you, forget the rest, forget Majid. She's the one that is the most gross example of how terrible they are.
It's amazing that no one has ever had to go into hiding for writing critically about Ayaan Hirsi Ali.
Yeah,
I mean, that should tell you a lot.
It's a wonder, huh? Isn't that bizarre? Nobody's going to jail, or no one's being murdered for drawing a cartoon of Ayaan.
Okay, well, to clumsily segue into some absolute horror in the States these last few weeks, and of course I think the country's still reeling from it. Obviously, is the Orlando shooting in a gay nightclub, Pulse. Now, I mean, it's one of them horrible things that just so happens to contain many American political hot topics. You have same-sex relationships in there, you have gun control, and you have Islamic terrorism. And it's been, I'm going to say interesting, but kind of predictable to see the way people have reacted to it in the liberal media, how ideology's been instantly discounted yet again. And I just thought maybe we could get your thoughts on this. Yeah,
well, look, it's so... just dealing with exactly what happened real quick. It's a tragedy of tragedies. These people, look, I'm gay, I'm married. I was closeted for a long time. I know what it's like when you can't be fully who you are, and you go to gay clubs where it is, I hate the phrase safe space, but for people that cannot be out necessarily. Now, look, I'm sure many of these people were out and living wonderful, full lives, but there were definitely some people there too who couldn't even be who they are in the real world, and went there for a little bit of an escape. So just that little piece shouldn't be glossed over. But look, yes, the reaction, of course, from the left was the same old thing. Immediately, there is this insane defense of Islam, even though this guy called 911, pledged allegiance to ISIS. He was on the FBI watch list, all of this stuff. And now they're saying that maybe he was gay himself. But you know what, if that's true, which it probably is from everything I've read, but only a religion that would tell you you're evil for being gay could get you to turn that hatred so inward that you would not only feel like you have to kill, you're not just killing other people, you're going to kill yourself in this melee, which he did. He was killed by doing it, and he knew that was going to happen, obviously. Yeah,
I think he had a good idea that's how it would end.
Yeah, so look, but the left, of course, they immediately, look, where should they go to? After something like this happens, who should you blame? You should blame the person that did it and the ideology which led them to it. Now, the gun, we can talk about the gun thing too. Now, absolutely, this guy was on a list, so he shouldn't have been able to get some of these guns, and this fell through the cracks. And he also fell through the watch list, as I said. So that's a separate issue, because if I had an AR-15, which apparently isn't the gun he used actually, but if I had a semi-automatic or any of these weapons, I would, if there was sitting one right next to me right now, I would not take it and walk into a gay bar and shoot people, and I would not take it and walk into a mosque and shoot people. So that shows you that intentions matter, ideology matters. It's not about the weapon. The weapon is the tool that is used for this. Now, we have a gun problem in the United States, without question, but that's not what this is about. And then the left immediately goes to, and the Democrats that are doing the sit-in, which just ended in Congress, immediately go to the gun stuff, which again, it's a legitimate issue, but it's separate from this. How about they do a sit-in about, let's actually talk about radical Islam. Let's actually talk about an ideology that wants to destroy the West. But they refuse to do that. And, I saw people like, do you know this woman, Sally Cohn? She's a CNN contributor. Do you know who she is by any chance?
I probably recognize her, but I don't know her by name.
Yeah, so she was, just firing off just regressive tweet after tweet. All religions are bad, and, each one has its extremists and blah, blah, blah. And I retweeted one of her tweets, and I said, Sally, could you just tell me which one would be the worst for an outspoken Jewish lesbian? Because that's what she is. She's a Jewish lesbian who is outspoken, meaning she's on TV all the time sharing her opinions. So could you just tell me which one? Because guess what? You live in a Christian country, and they're not killing you for being an outspoken Jewish lesbian. I'm pretty sure the one Jewish country wouldn't kill you for doing that. And guess what? The other religion, can you just admit it? And of course, it got like 1,000 retweets, and she didn't even respond, because they have nothing. They know. They have bullshit tricks that everyone is seeing through. And the reason that they're so angry and they're so outraged all the time is that's all they've got left. We have logic on our side. We're not demonizing it. I had no intentions, nor did I demonize every Muslim. But I have to demonize the guy who did it and the reasons why he did it. That's simply the truth. So when the left, when they won't bake a gay cake, some Christian won't bake a gay cake in Indiana for a gay wedding, the left goes bananas, and they slam and smear every Christian, and they tell you how horrible they are. And yet when they throw gays off roofs in Syria, and when Iran hangs gays, and when this guy shoots up gays, suddenly we got to defend the Muslims. And it doesn't make sense. How about taking another group that should be on your oppression Olympics, Latinos, because they generally are thought of as brown people. The Latino community, they got trumped by Islam in this case, because you didn't really hear any outcry. This was a Latino night at this gay club.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, so most of the people that were killed were Latino, thought of as brown people of color, right? So you would think that they would get some extra credit from the left, but no, because Islam trumps that, even that. The outpouring of support was suddenly to Muslims. Now, again, I have nothing against Muslim people. I don't know how many times I can say this, but this is a real flaw in logic. You cannot, if you in the West will defend an ideology that will kill you, well, guess what? One day it will come for you.
Yeah, defending it won't save you, unfortunately.
No, that's what they think, though. They think that they think that they're so right, that their cause is so morally just, that somehow I think really that's what they think, that they think they'll be saved. They think you can nice your way out of this. Except guess what? We don't know what the political beliefs of any of those people were at that club. That guy went in there to murder people using an ideology that says kill non-believers, kill gay people, et cetera, et cetera. So guess what? They're coming for you no matter how nice you want to be. And we have to have an honest discussion about that. Otherwise, we've lost already.
Yeah, I see a kind of reverse problem here in terms of politicians. Usually politicians tell you what you want to hear, then do the opposite. On this subject, they appear to be completely clueless, but still kind of tackle jihadism behind the scenes. And I wanted to reference Hillary Clinton the other day. I think someone finally got her to name the issue, and she came out with the phrase radical Islamism. Mm-hmm. As though there's a kosher version of Islamism, which isn't, a little bit of Islamism's not too bad for you kind of thing. And I was wondering, how clueless do you think our elected leaders are on this topic?
Man, that's tough, because I think they're all clueless. They're all kind of just want to be elected. They want to go to the right parties. They never want to say anything to really upset people. But look, if the left, and this is a case where, I agree with Bill Maher usually on 90% of the stuff, but I'm going to disagree with him here. I note how I'm not going to slander and smear him. So Bill Maher on his show a couple weeks ago did a piece about how the rise of Trump is purely a creation of the right. It has nothing to do with the left.
Right.
Now, this is completely the reverse of everything I've been talking about for months. This is reverse of what Sam has been talking about for quite some time, and many others, that if the left, and Majid and plenty more, if the left won't deal with these issues honestly, if the left is afraid to say radical Islam, if the left is afraid to discuss that Islamism is a political ideology, not a religious ideology, and they don't like terms also because they're not that bright usually, so they don't understand the difference between a religion, a political ideology, jihad, which is a violent use of an ideology. If the left won't deal with these things honestly, then guess what happens? A guy goes into a nightclub, he kills 50 people, the left won't really talk about it. People aren't stupid, so they see this, and then they go, man, they're missing the point here. And then what happens? Trump or another right-wing populist, in Europe or wherever else, comes in with easy answers, and that's why those parties are winning across Europe right now and gaining strength, and that explains a lot to do with Trump. So I see this very differently than Bill Maher sees it, because I believe this is the fault of the left. If there was Hillary had to be dragged, kicking and screaming, basically, to say that. But I sense it's too late probably for her, because if there's another one of these things, it's going to help Trump again, because the left refused to just deal with not the world as you want it to be, but the world as it is. That's a huge problem.
The only time I ever hear about the Christian Crusades is when there's an act of Islamic terror.
Exactly. Think about that concept, that if someone in 2016, in the name of Islam, shoots up a Paris theater, or shoots up, the Belgian school, or shoots up this nightclub in Orlando, or wherever, we can go through all over the globe, basically. And your reaction every time is, well, Christianity did bad things too. What are you saying? That means that in effect, you're saying there are crusades happening right now, but because they happened before, we shouldn't say anything about them, which is completely insane. And that's what I mean. Their logic, because they're trying to be moral. They're trying to trick you with fake morality. So every time they do that, you stop and you think, well, the Christians did this, so I better not get upset that some Muslims are doing this now. And that's just insane. So for example, my old cohorts on TYT, which I don't watch anymore. I literally have not watched a full episode or even a full clip since I left there. But people send me things all the time. They did their coverage of Orlando, and of course they bring up Dylan Roof, the one white guy who shot whatever it was down in Charleston. Of course they bring him up. They show his picture. They bring up the one Orthodox Jew who stabbed some people at the Pride Parade in Jerusalem. And it's like, all right, well, yes, no one's saying that all religions don't have bad people. And guess what? There are bad non-believers too. Every group has bad people that do bad things. But just taking one and being like, here's that one, and that obviously represents everybody, and now there's a gajillion others, but they don't represent anything. It's like your logic is shit. It's just shit. And we have to not be afraid to call it out, because this stuff, and then you couple it with trigger warnings and safe spaces and all this bullshit on college campuses. It's becoming a toxic mess that if we don't stop now, it's getting young people's minds. And guess what? Young people are the ones that are going to lead us to tomorrow, and tomorrow's going to be pretty messy if we don't deal with it now. Yeah,
that's a great point. I used to be a bit smug about this whole safe space trigger warning thing. I thought it was a kind of stateside malady, and we've imported it. We're finding it in universities and college campuses up and down the United Kingdom. And what do you think that kind of thing's going to produce for our future when we can't have open, robust debates about things?
It's so freaking dangerous. I went to UCLA with Milo Yiannopoulos, and he was on his Dangerous Faggot tour, and it sounds hateful and mean, even though he's gay, and he's saying the word faggot, and he's bleached blonde British guy who you could knock over with a feather, who I really like, actually, even though I disagree with him on
disagree with him on so much, but I can't help but have a little bit of affection for him.
If you ask, I've said this to him on air, he'll admit he's a provocateur. He's purposely throwing out bombs so that he's getting the conversation going. And guess what? It's working. Not everyone is going to listen to you and listen to me in a more measured, nuanced way, right? Even though he has actually plenty of nuance when you really get him to go on something. But that's just the difference in debate. That's like the difference between, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. People have different tactics for often what could be the same goal, right?
Right.
So we went to UCLA. There were probably, 800 or 1,000 kids trying to get into the talk. There were about 100 people that didn't want to get in. They created a human wall in front of the door. So they're not against walls. They don't like Trump's wall, but they don't mind a wall for their own purposes. And, they're throwing garbage cans and they're spitting in people's faces. They're getting right up in cops' faces with iPhones, trying to instigate them. They're screaming, they're bashing on the doors. And it's like, guys, let the guy talk. And then, you know what? He's actually going to do a Q&A after. So feel free to ask him whatever you want. And if that's not good enough for you, then the next night, bring on a feminist who's going to counter everything he says. Bring on a gay person who's going to counter everything he says. Whatever it is, that's the social contract that we have related to free speech. But if you are going to actively stop someone from speaking, and the only reason they can get away with this is because they've been tricked into thinking that they're morally right. The left has used all of those words that I keep repeating of bigotry and racism and all that to trick these young people to think that no matter what, they're morally right and the people who disagree with them are wicked and evil. And it's actually a tactic of religion. So it's the left that's using this disgusting tactic that has created religion, that we're morally right and you're not, so you're automatically the enemy. It's the left using that right now. These are supposed to be my guys, but those freaks dumping garbage cans and screaming, those are not my people.
Yeah, I'm a self-hating lefty at the moment, and that's one of the reasons I have quite a bit of affection for Milo, because he manages to rattle the cages on the left, and it's a magnificent reaction when he does it. But I mean, some of these tactics, it's textbook fascism, really, isn't it? I don't like to throw that word around so willy-nilly, but it really is, isn't it? Trying to prevent someone from a platform they've been invited to. It's a voluntary event. I don't understand why they can't have these views aired and, like you say, counter them in their own time or in the right, form for it.
Yeah, this is so important for us. So as a self-hating lefty, as you just said, and as anyone that's on the left, if you consider yourself liberal, truly liberal, or a classic liberal, or even a libertarian, any of these things, you're somewhat centered. A liberal, all really a liberal is that you're willing to accept logic and reason, and you will change your opinions as new information comes around. That doesn't mean you change your moral code, but as information changes, as times change, as technology changes, you can change and alter how you view the world. That's what being a true liberal is. And they have created a situation where that's the reverse. That has nothing to do with anything on the left at this point. So when people say that I'm on the left, I suppose in the context of this left-right thing, the way that we do American politics, certainly, where we only have two parties and all that, I suppose I'm still on the left, but amazingly, having liberal values is becoming a conservative position. And that's a scary thought, but defending free speech, which I would put as the number one liberal value there is becoming conservative. It's not something that progressives care about.
Yeah, is this something that people are now referring to the alt-right, the alternative right?
Yeah, look, the alt-right, all day long, they're sending Hitler memes to everybody, and this frog that looks like Trump or Pepe or something, and there's Nazi gas chamber pictures, and they, said terrible, all this stuff. So I don't know exactly what it's about, but frankly, I would always defend, short of, until someone's at my house with a pitchfork or directly threatening violence, I would let anyone do whatever they want. I believe in freedom of speech. And if these people want to sit behind a computer just to get, to make what they're really doing, it's a lot of trolling so that they want well-known people to start talking about them. And then these people feed them every time. That's why I never feed them. So if they send these things to me, I'm like, all right, congratulations. You're home and you sent me a picture of, Trump as a Nazi, whatever. It's like, all right, congratulations. As long as you're not directly calling for violence and creating an atmosphere of violence, then, you know what, congratulations with your Nazi pictures. But not to say, by the way, not to say that that's what the whole alt-right is about. And I should dive into it a little bit more. And, I've had Mike Cernovich on, who I mentioned before, who I think is an alt-right guy. And Milo obviously is sort of bouncing around in that. But when I went to the Milo event, I met all kinds of kids after, of every race, color, religion, a kid in a wheelchair and an able people, you have to call, if you can stand straight, you're an able person now, all of this stuff. I met all these people, and they were black, white, and Asian and everything. And a lot of them were saying, I'm liberal but I'm here because I got to defend free speech. And that's a strange political position to be in, that these liberals are supporting Trump. And then on the other hand, they're defending the thing that is the cog for everything else. And I understand it.
Well, here's something then. I mean, the best thing, in my view, and especially in British politics, would be to allow someone like Donald Trump to speak ad nauseum. That'd be his greatest undoing, and it doesn't seem to be having that effect, strangely, in America. I mean, this is a guy who's ostensibly a bad sitcom character from my perspective. It's hard to overstate just how insane it is, this man's political career. And I was just wondering how you feel about him as a person, whether he's likely to end up in the White House.
Yeah, well, let me first say this, that I do not watch reality television at all. I from day one, when that monstrosity started around 2001 or so, I never was into it. The only reality show that I ever watched was Celebrity Apprentice. So I don't know what that says about Trump, but there was something about it that I liked. There was something about just the process of the show and his unpredictable nature and whatever it is. So there's something going on there just at the cultural level with him, right? Now, I don't know what is going to happen, because I was wrong. I fully admit this, that back in October, after one or two debates, I had Michael Steele on my show, who's the former head of the RNC. Great guy, obviously big political insider. He gets it. And I said to him, I think Trump's going to do 3 debates and drop out. And he said, nope, this is the real deal. And you better watch out, because people are angry and you're missing the boat here. And he nailed it, and I missed it, and I think most people missed it. And ironically, all the people, every pundit on television, by the way, missed it. Everybody. And they're all the ones that are still predicting the future now. And that's a beautiful thing of being a pundit on television. You can get everything wrong consistently, and you never lose your job.
Can fail upwards.
You fail upwards, left and right. That's what it's all about, because they're all in bed together. Nobody knows what the hell. None of these pundits, all these bloviating morons, they've never accomplished anything, so they can always talk about how they could fix everything, of course. But, they're just talking about it. They don't ever have to do it, But as for Trump, look, I understand the people. Now that I went to that Milo thing, and I feel like I'm so inside of this free speech thing and all that, I understand the people that are voting for him, and it has nothing to do with policy. And this is what I think a lot of people are missing. It is, if you ask anyone why they're supporting Trump, pretty much they'll say it's because he's, screwing with the system, and he just says things without a teleprompter. He says whatever he wants. And then if you say to them, well, but do you think he really is? Now it sounds like he's sort of anti-abortion. He obviously was for abortion before, or now it's confusing where he's at on gay rights or this or that. And it's like they're not voting on any of that stuff. They're voting purely on a cultural movement. They are so tired and sick of being afraid of their own thoughts that maybe we needed this over-the-top, clownish, in a way, demagogue to break the system. So I understand that. Now, I'm not there. And I don't like Hillary either. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I really don't know what I'm going to do. I'm leaning towards Gary Johnson, who's a libertarian. I mean, if there was ever a year to have a protest vote, I think this would be it, to maybe lay some groundwork for 2020 of having a legitimate third party, which we desperately need. But I would say if I was a betting person right this second, I would bet that he's going to win.
Wow, that's terrifying. I'll be honest with you, Dave, but I think you're right, because nobody really thought we'd still be speaking about him this late in the day. And but I suppose part of me kind of wants him to win just to entertain the thought of him being in a room with Putin.
Can you imagine the two of them in a room together? Look, you got to also understand this, that Trump, at the end of the day, he's not running to ruin the world. He has a lot to lose. He has a business empire. He has wealthy family and friends. He's not running the world so that he doesn't want to run the world so that he can destroy the world, right? So I suspect that if he became president, look, he's doing all of these outlandish and crazy things and says things that are so circular in nature. And someone said, he basically only speaks at a 10-year-old level. He's doing these things because he wants to win. Does anyone think he would really govern like this? I don't know. And, fortunately, for at least a little bit longer, we do have separation of powers in this country. And, hopefully, Congress and eventually the judiciary would be able to control his authority. But if you want to beat Trump, I think what all you have to do, if someone wanted to expose Trump really, is get him in an interview, and I know he's great at wiggling out of every question, but start doing some like basic civics 101 with him. Start doing basic social studies that you should have learned in 8th grade. Like, does he know what the separation of powers really are? Does he know what the difference between the judicial branch and the legislative branch really are? Like, does he know anything about how the government works? And look, he'd wiggle his way out of it, and people would like him for it more because they'd say, you're just asking him gotcha questions. But I think just getting him to really lay out, like, do you have a basic sense of how this whole thing works? I get it. You want to win. It's all about winning. But, like, do you get the real job here? I think that might be a way of exposing some of it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to wonder what he has to do now. There's nothing he can do, really, that'll turn his own people against him now. I think that ship sailed. But, I mean, harking back to what we were talking about before, I meant to pick this up, and you mentioned this idea of him being a product of the left's failure on these issues, and I agree with that 100%. He's filled a void, essentially, that's been left by sensible people. And with you saying that Bill Maher's got a different view on it, I mean, I think I might have seen you try to reach out to him before as a guest on the show. Is that right?
Oh, I've reached out to Bill many times, and actually I've had a couple meetings finally after a long time. I've met with the booker over there. I had a great sit down with the executive producer, and I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. It'll happen. It takes a long time to get on there, and I think maybe they needed my star to rise a little bit more, which knock on wood, we seem to be getting there. And also I agreed with Bill on so much that made it a little more difficult to put me on, where now I do sense that I disagree with him more. And that's great. That's great. It's personally great, and it's fine. And I'll regardless, even if our political split widened much more, I would always admire this guy. Helped me with my political awakening all these years, and has fought for every liberal position that has ever existed. Basically, this guy has fought for, and that's why that whole insanity with Affleck and Sam was so crazy, because the next day, and I think we talked about this before, but the next day, the onus was suddenly on Bill and Sam to defend themselves as if they were racist.
Yes.
And it's like Bill Maher has stood for every minority, every other, et cetera, et cetera. He is a full-on lefty. He a lefty more than I am. And the idea that now it's up to him to prove that he's not racist because one idiot, one movie maker, Affleck, called him racist is such immature, childish, and nonsensical thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it's really bittersweet for me because I despise the way Affleck behaved, but I'm a massive Batman fan, so I kind of, it's conflicting, I'll be honest with you.
You know what? I couldn't even go see the movie. He makes me so nauseous that I passed on the movie. I was like, you know what? I'm not giving that my $15. I'll watch it when it comes on HBO or something, but I was just like, I just can't. I just can't do it.
I wanted him to be so bad. I wanted him to be George Clooney levels of bad. And the really frustrating thing, and you won't want to hear this, is the movie's terrible, but he's actually quite good, which just makes it worse.
I've heard, but you know what? Look, in a way, we have to thank him, ultimately, because what he did look, I don't even know really what he believes, and I don't know why he was so angry that particular day and, all of that stuff. But had he not done that, had he not so obviously exposed what this illiberal ideology is, what this regressive ideology is, had he not done it, it would have taken a lot of us a lot longer to wake up. But he did something that was so over the top and so smug and so dishonest. After all Sam did was lay out Pew polls. All he did was repeat Pew polls. No one ever thought Pew polls were racist before. That's all Sam did. And had he not done something that was so ridiculous, it may not have gotten a lot of us to start talking about this. And I'm sure you do too, but I get so much email literally every day, people saying, because I've talked about how that was my final wake-up call, and I get a ton of email, people saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So in a way, we have to thank him, because who knows how much longer a lot of people would have been asleep about this stuff.
Poor Sam, though, turns up to promote his waking up book, ends up in a scrap with Batman in front of millions of people.
Yeah. Listen, talk about karma. He's trying to do a book about spirituality without religion, which, by the way, I had read it right before I interviewed him, but I was, right before the show was starting. I didn't really have the time to fully ingest it properly, but I read it a couple, maybe 2 months ago when I was on vacation in Mexico on a beach. And it's a wonderful book about how do you find peace without believing in things that aren't provable. It's a wonderful book, and his whole book tour, as he said, was hijacked by defending himself from being called racist. I mean, that's some shit.
Yeah, it's a great book. I frequent Mexico as well. Beautiful country.
Mexico's great. Listen, if he thinks he's going to build this wall, I'm pretty sure it's going to be Americans trying to get out, not Mexicans trying to get in.
Yeah, I mean, harking back to the reaction to this horrible shooting in the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, the FBI's reaction to it when they released these transcripts. I mean, I'm not sure if everyone knows, but during this carnage, this killer Omar Mateen called, I think, TV stations as well as the police and pledged his allegiance to al-Baghdadi and the Islamic State. And these transcripts were finally released by the FBI, and they took the liberty of making some omissions, and they basically whitewashed any reference to the Islamic State or its leader. And I'm really still scratching my head to try and figure out what they was trying to achieve with that.
I mean, this is what Majid Duaz calls the Voldemort effect. That if I'm sure you've seen Harry Potter, if you don't say it, somehow it's going to go away. And that's just insane. You are strengthening it. Look, I have no desire to draw a Muhammad cartoon. I'm not a good artist. You know what I mean? Like, it just has nothing to do with anything I need to do in my life. But guess what? The same people who don't want you to draw a Muhammad cartoon are the same people that wouldn't want a gay bar opening up in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
Or even opening up in your neighborhood. And that's why you can't give an inch. You cannot give an inch to intolerance. You cannot be tolerant of intolerance. There are, 1.6 billion Muslim people. I would suspect that the large majority, and look, we could look at those Pew numbers, but I think the average number, even forgetting Pew numbers, if they could be skewed, the average person on earth, I think we come from the same star stuff, and the average person wants to live a decent life. What screws that up is when evil ideology says kill the kuffar, kill the non-believer, or force them, subjugate women, or find the Jew behind the rock, or some of this other crazy shit. And I would recommend that anyone, and if you haven't had him on your show, you absolutely should have Bill Warner on. Do you know Dr. Bill Warner?
No, I don't think so.
He runs a site called politicalislam.com. He's a scientist.
You mean he's a bigot?
Oh, total bigot. He's white, of course. He's white, so he has no right to talk about any of this stuff, even though Islam isn't a race, which is so confusing for many people, no matter how many times you explain it.
Still having this conversation.
He's a 72, I think, year old scientist, spent his whole life in science and academics, and decided to start studying religion about 30 years ago. And he focuses on Islam. And he talks about how, look, these books are not all the same. And anyone should know that. Even if you're a full atheist or you're a religious person or whatever, look, the texts are different by default. They're named differently. The contents of them are different. But so even if you're an atheist and you think that these things are all nonsense, which is what I think, they were man-written things just to control people. But what you have to worry about is what their adherents believe. It's not about what's in them. It's only about what people who act on what's in them believe and what they do. And right now, in 2016, on Earth, only one of those three has a tremendous amount of people acting on bad ideology. Now, that does not mean, of course, that there are bad Jews and there are bad Christians. And I live in LA here, where there are ultra-Orthodox Jews who, it's 100 degrees right now in LA. I kid you not, right this second as we're talking. And they're going to be walking around in black jackets and big wool hats. Who in God's name would want to do that? God, saying that ironically. But you know what I mean? Like, that's only religion would make a otherwise probably sane person walk around in LA in 100 degrees in a wool jacket. I mean, that's a crazy thing. But guess what? They're not beheading people. They're not trying to convert people. And that's a fundamental difference. And look, those gay cake people, the Christians that wouldn't bake the gay cake, guess what? I'd rather go to just another place and let them be exposed. So you know what? You don't like gay people. You don't want to bake a cake. Okay, so be it. But they're not killing people. And if we in the West, if free thinkers are afraid to talk about this, what we're letting the left do is we're letting the left take an ideology which says it wants to dominate. We're letting them take that ideology and say, no, you're not going to talk about this. Well, guess what? What else can't we talk about then? Because it's not going to stop with that. It will just keep creeping further and further. And that's why this awakening is so important. That's why it's so great that so many people are finally talking about this. But we're still very much at the nascent stages of this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree about. I mean, I don't really feel. I'd never really would have ever felt any compulsion to draw Mohammed in any way. It just feels a bit cheap. I don't mind people who do it, but then when you're told you absolutely mustn't draw Mohammed, then it becomes necessary, ironically. Well, we have to now, because my freedom of expression is more important than your dogmas.
Of course. And guess what? The same people on the left who will be outraged if someone drew a picture of Mohammed, even though it's not their, often they're not Muslim, so it's not their sensibilities, but they're defending someone else's sensibilities. So that means they're righteous. Now, meanwhile, those people wouldn't give a shit if when Iran does a Holocaust denial campaign and they show, Jews burning in ovens and controlling the world and all this terrible shit. Now, I have family on both sides of my family, on my dad and my mom's side, who died in the Holocaust. I have ancestors who died in a genocide. Guess what? You want to draw those fucking cartoons? Go ahead. And I will use my free speech to mock you and ridicule you and show the world what a hateful freak you are. But I'm not gonna shoot you over it. But we can't be tolerant of the people that would do that. And that's the problem. We think that we can just nice ourselves way out of this, right? Like, you see on Twitter every time the shooting in Orlando, you see Twitter hashtag love wins or love every man or, high heart this. And it's like, guys, you're a bunch of fucking idiots. You're moral, you're virtue signaling fools. You think that you can trick people into just liking you because you love. But that it literally has no meaning whatsoever. If people want to kill you and they say, I want to kill you, and after Paris they release a statement that explains the verses that they used to kill those people, and then you say, your response is, well, I don't want to blame them for that. It's because America did this, or, look, it's just crazy. If someone says, I'm going to kill you, and then they kill some people and then say why I did it, I'm going to take their word for it.
Yes, I mean, some of the actions these people take only make sense in light of their doctrine. I mean, there's no other reason to explain it other than what they believe to be true about their holy text.
Of course, and that's why I said before, it's not about the text to me in the literal sense, because all of these texts have bad things. The Old Testament is incredibly violent and ridiculous. But there aren't that many people acting on it. But that's, as I said before, the left will love that they can point to that one Orthodox Jew who stabbed a couple people. Then that proves that they're all the same. Except that's just silly. That's not a defense of that guy in any way. I hope he rots in jail for the rest of his life. But it's about what the actions that if people believe it and put those things into actions. And don't tell me as a free-thinking atheist, as a gay person, as someone that believes in Western society and would fight for the minority and wants the individual to be able to live and think as they please. Don't tell me that something that says I should be killed is the same thing that I shouldn't talk about. And that's what they're doing. And it's incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well made. I mean, we're recording this on what is it? It's Thursday, the 23rd of June. Here in Britain, it's polling day, which isn't nearly as exciting as it sounds.
You got to get out there, right?
Well,
you haven't voted yet.
Yeah, I've got my democratic duty. I've still got an hour. The funny thing is, the polling station's directly across from my house in a church, and I may have changed my mind about what I'm going to do about 4 times before I get there. It's been one of them kind of big clusterfuck of misinformation, and I mean, American politics takes center stage here in our media. We see about it all the time. We hear about it. I'm well into it. I find it really fascinating, and I kind of get this inferiority complex that maybe British politics doesn't hit the news in the States quite the same way.
We get almost nothing. Let me tell you this. On our cable news, which I watch these things a lot, I try to do an hour of cardio in the morning, and I just flip between the big 3 just to get a sense of what's going on. All we do pretty much at this point is talk election. They talk Trump and Clinton pretty much 24 hours a day. There'll be a little bit of other news about, if there's obviously the Orlando thing or some sort of breaking news, but we do almost no, at least the cable news in America does almost no international stuff whatsoever. There'll be a minor blip on MSNBC today about Brexit. And look, the network news will do a little bit more, but network news, first off, almost no one watches it, and it's only a half hour on the main channel. So My feelings on Brexit, and I've said this, a lot of people have been asking me about this, and I am not an expert, by the way. I want to put that out.
Nobody knows anything.
That's funny because we traded a couple of DMs before this, and you were saying that. Like, it's like, first off, I sense that even for you guys, it's hard to tell what the truth is. But I've read plenty about it. My gut feeling is that if I was you right now, and I knew everything that's going on with immigration and the lack of ability to control these borders, and knowing that a lot of the decision-making of my country was being taken away from local people that I elected, and it was being shifted to this bigger EU thing. It sounds very much like what Emperor Palpatine wanted to do in the prequels. If I knew all of that, my guess is that I would vote to leave, because the border thing is so important. And by the way, borders are not racist. Every country on earth exists because they have borders. It's like the Trump wall thing. I don't know that the wall is a smart thing to do. I don't even know that it's economical or feasible. And they would have to do all kinds of eminent domain to do it. And it's probably totally ridiculous. But it's not. But defending your borders, especially for you guys, where these migrants are coming through from country to country and nobody knows what's going on, that's not racist. It's called self-preservation. So my guess is I would be for it, but I totally defer to you on this.
Well, shit, I've changed my mind again. So I'll have to get back to you. I'll let you know where I've gone on this one. But like I say, I could change myself.
Half an hour ago, that's what you were telling me, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, my instincts are Remain, and this, I'll admit, is purely motivated by the fear of the unknown. What would an out of the European Union look like? How would it affect the economy? Would my job be safe? Them kind of things. So. But the problem is, the so-called experts, the mouthpieces on TV, they're practically unanimously Remain. But a lot of people who I respect and trust their judgment are on the outside of it. So you included now, thanks, Dave. So I'm very conflicted.
Please don't take what I said for any value into that voting box. What do you guys do there? Do you pull a lever? Do you punch a button? Is it a computer? What do you actually do?
It's literally a piece of paper, and you put an X on it. And then you post it in a box and you're done. You have two choices. I want to stay, I want to leave, and words to that effect, and that's it. I only found out this last week, actually, that if you don't want to vote, you can still turn up and you can basically ruin your paper and put that in the box, and they still have to be counted. So we have the figures for so many Remain, so many leave, and so many people objected to the whole thing, and they have to count them as well.
It's so fascinating. And the fact that you guys are going through this massive, massive thing, and that, that you're basically our number one ally in the world, and that we don't really talk about it. It's so crazy. And I know, listen, you guys have all those tabloids. So for as crappy as our media is, you guys have like a whole other level of like craziness that you have to sift through. So I don't envy that sometimes too.
Yeah, the press in this country is beyond the pale, I think. I've actually started studying journalism in my spare time because I can't bear having to get my news from other places now. So I should.
Where do you get your news? What do you do? Because people ask me that all the time, and I'm struggling to come up with an answer that makes sense. I try to bounce around between, some left-leaning things and some right-leaning things, and I'll read a couple articles on the same thing so that I can try to get some truth out of it. But there's not a lot that I trust. I really trust.
Yeah, I agree. I'll go to the BBC because they're usually impartial, despite all the problems I have with them. That's one of my main places to go. But I think one of the best things I do sometimes is go to a timeline of somebody whose politics I disagree with and see what they're sharing, because a lot of sources that I'm not familiar with, and I'll see, what's the right-leaning perspective on this. And you get people now who are very set in the genetic fallacy, aren't they? They'll instantly dismiss a story because it comes from one place or another rather than judging it on its merits, and I think that's unhelpful.
Well, it's funny because every now and again I'll tweet a link out from Fox News, and sometimes they'll sometimes though they just aggregate the way everyone else does. Like it'll actually be an AP article that they just laid in some other pictures on or something like that, and I'll tweet out an article. And look, if I tweet something out, I've usually read it thoroughly enough that I sense it's within the ballpark of what's actually true. And if I do that, I immediately get a burst of people say, you sold out the bottom. Like, what are you talking about? Like, A, they're not paying me. B, you're allowed to click on a site that's other than Huffington Post every now and again, you know? Because guess what? They do some shitty journalism too sometimes. So that's the danger, that we just keep splitting ourselves. And it's our job, you know, for people like us that really do want honest conversation and want things to actually get better. It's our job to keep pushing on that, because no one else is going to do it.
I agree. I mean, there's a newspaper in the UK, the Daily Mail. Reputation's mud. You cannot, if you share a link to that in left-leaning circles, it's as if you've just exposed your genitals. It's the reaction. I mean, I went through a period where if I found a story on the Daily Mail, even if it was well sourced and well written, I'd try and seek an alternate source, because it just wasn't worth it. But I've just started not giving a shit now. And if you can stand by something, by all means, share it. Is my opinion.
That's funny. You know, I once shared a thing on the Daily Mail about a year ago, and it had something to do with ISIS and, you know, some horrible things they were doing to women or something like that. And I tweeted it out, and then about 15 minutes later, they changed the title. So the link remained, but they changed the title because they had obviously butchered the title. They changed a couple of the quotes and all that, but they didn't issue a correction anywhere.
Oh, dear.
So people were giving me shit all day because I guess my tweet didn't really reflect how they had changed the article. And, you know, if you're not going to issue a correction, you know, so I don't know that I've ever linked to them since then.
Yeah, that is sneaky. Bad journalism.
No.
Dave, I always love our conversations, and they always fly by. It's the most easiest going, enjoyable hour I think I could have of an evening. Is there anything else you wanted to get in at all?
I think we did it, but first off, I want to publicly say that I'm absolutely going to have you on the new version of the Rubin Report, which debuts hopefully the first week in July, but we'll get you on during the summer for sure.
Excellent.
And when are you visiting the States? We need some sane people here.
Well, there's talk of a trip to Vegas in September. That's on the agenda at the moment. So maybe Trump will lend me a helicopter or something. I can come and see you.
Yeah, well, listen, it's only about a 4-hour drive to LA. Dinner is on me, and I'll find some anti-regressive warriors. I've got a couple of them out here. And we'll do something fun.
It's a deal. Sounds great.
Yeah, cool. Well, good luck with Brexit, I hope. Just please don't think about me when you're in there. Just do it, whatever you're going to do, please.
Okay, Dave Rubin says is what I'm going to write on my ballot paper. All right, man. Thank you very much for taking the time again. It's always a pleasure.
All right, likewise. Thanks, brother.
Thank you to my fantastic guest, Dave Rubin. You can find Dave on Twitter at Rubin Report. And thank you very much for listening. You can keep up to date on the podcast at gspellchecker.com. I think we've all learned something here today.